Stream. Excellent. You should have received a notice.
Okay, I guess are we ready to start then? Welcome everyone, and to the new faces. This is my first time as chair. Thank you, Jane, for steering us through the last year. Um, I would like the agenda. First item up is introductions, and since we have a bunch of new people, that'll be great. Um, I will go last, and I will just, if we could just maybe popcorn it, since I see everybody's got a name up, and I will kick it over to one of our students. Tess, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you decided to join the committee?
Yeah, it's nice to meet you all. My name's Tess. I'm a sophomore at Grant High School. I'm really excited to start working and learning from you all. I guess I've always been really passionate about climate justice and climate change in general. And I've been to plenty of trainings and protests and stuff like that, but I'm always looking for new ways to make change, especially in our community and in my school. So this felt like a really impactful way to do that. It's such an honor being a part of this committee, and I look forward to coming together and making change together in Portland.
I'll just call on Diego. And then if you can call on the next person after you, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah. I'm Diego Romero. I'm a senior at Lincoln High School. And one of the reasons I joined this committee is because I want to start getting more experience in kind of the policy side of addressing climate change. And I'm really excited to bring my scientifically driven perspective, drawing from my experience as an intern and lab assistant at Portland State University, to this panel. And I'm also really excited to listen and learn from the community, as well as my fellow panelist members. Let's go with Isaac.
Hi, folks. I'm Isaac Barrow. Real quick, Tess, is your father Dane by any chance?
Yeah.
Oh, he's also my boss. Tell him Isaac says hi.
Okay.
But I've heard a lot about you. Nice to actually put a face to a name. So Isaac Barrow, day jobs at PGE, but more importantly, more related to this, I've got two kids. Both went through the JMP program, so Richmond to Tabor to Grant, and the youngest is currently a junior at Grant, and been with the community, I think, as most of us, since the inception, but very much looking forward to, as we move from framework development to implementation. And I will pass the baton to Diane.
Yeah, great to see everybody. Welcome, Tess and Diego. It's lovely to have some new blood in the mix, and we're delighted that that you have such exciting backgrounds, of course. And I expect to learn from you, and as well as my colleagues who have been on the community, etc. My name's Diane Riley. I go by she and her pronouns. I use she and her pronouns. I work for Columbia Riverkeeper as a fundraiser, essentially. Have been doing nonprofit work and worked briefly for the government a couple times, the IRS at one point, the city of Portland at another point. But mostly have done nonprofit work and usually cause-driven work for many, many years. I got into the environmental movement as a kid many years ago. I would say even in my early youth, in the late 60s, I was interested in environmental issues. And then my interest in various social justice issues grew over the same period of time. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I have a 9-year-old at Richmond Elementary. He is a delight, and I'm excited by his involvement in the in the Portland public school system, and my ability to connect with our community the way we do. I'm going to call on Eric next.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so Eric Opsel, and Tess, not to put you too much on the spot, but I've crossed paths with your dad, Dane, as well, and work on some policy things. So I've worked with him as well. So just to let you know, maybe it's just me and Isaac. I don't know if everyone else has, but just to let you know.
I'll let him know.
Yeah, so Eric Opsel, I have a son who's a sixth grader at Lane Middle School, a daughter who went through the Portland Public Schools, who's a sophomore now at U of O. And I think I've been with this committee since it started, so some have heard this story as well. But for some of you in high school, my daughter was part of a lot of the climate movement back in middle school and high school, and even did one of the marches that I think led to a lot of what created this charter. So it was kind of cool when she went off to college that I could take up being part of this committee and take over for what she had helped start. So that's part of the reason that I'm here, and always excited to be a part of this. And I'll pass it off to Jane.
Hi, everyone. I also want to welcome Tess and Diego. It's great to have you on the committee. Thanks for your interest in taking the time to join us this year. I have a fifth grader and a seventh grader at Beverly Cleary School. And I was interested in serving on this committee because, in large part, I was involved for a few years leading up to the policy being adopted. I was involved in drafting it and working with community members and students who are activated around this as well, and helping shepherd it through the process with the board, the PPS school board. So I'm excited to see its implementation and be part of this committee. And I will invite Jessie to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Jesse. I am an alum from Lincoln High School, actually. Graduated in 2003, so a while ago. And graduated from Arizona State University with a bachelor's in sustainability and a bachelor's in business administration. And I'm a AmeriCorps Confluence member. So only here for 11 months working in the Climate Justice Department alongside Kat, hoping to make some progress over the next year or so on this climate crisis response policy. I'll pass it to Rosie.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, just jumping in a little late, but I'm happy to just introduce myself a little bit. Like Jesse, I'm also an AmeriCorps member serving in the Climate Justice Department, so also have that 11-month term. I'm originally from the Bay Area, but I went to school at Lewis and Clark, so I'm excited to be in the Portland scene still and working with students. Is there anybody that hasn't had the chance to introduce themselves?
Yes, Angela.
Oh,
hasn't
perfect.
introduced
Angela,
herself
would you like
yet.
to go?
Yes, thank you, Charity. Sorry, I was a little late. Angela Long. I have a 8th grader in Selwood Middle School. And I don't really know what I'm supposed to be saying because I jumped in late.
Just a quick intro of who you are so people will.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I have been in the energy conservation space in a variety of different positions, working with program implementation on energy efficiency programs to doing strategy for utilities on clean energy for the last 15 plus years. And I'm really excited to be part of this group and think about how this might apply to not just the building side, but also the education side.
Kat, do you want to say a little bit? I mean, we know you, but Why not?
Yeah, well, and I haven't had a chance to directly meet Tess yet, so I'm so excited to see you here and glad to see you again, Diego. So my name is Kat Davis. I'm the Climate Justice Advisor for Portland Public Schools. I work underneath our Chief of Staff, Jonathan Garcia, to advise on how we implement our climate crisis response policy district-wide. So really working with the community and teachers and students and staff to understand what it looks like to operationalize and systematize the amazing goals and priorities in this policy into our long-term and short-term strategies to see how we can do this really efficiently and cohesively and with a justice-driven lens. So that's a little bit about who I am. I'm super excited to get to work with you all on this initiative, and I'll toss it back to Charity.
All right, thank you. I'm Charity Fain, the chair this year of this committee, and I have two middle schoolers at Sunnyside Environmental School, so a 6th grader and an 8th grader. Been in PPS a while now, it feels like. And in my professional life, I'm the executive director of a climate justice organization called Community Energy Project. And so when you AmeriCorps folks finish your AmeriCorps, we do hire lots of ex-AmeriCorps at CEP, by the way. And we do around policy and advocacy, we do a lot of work around energy affordability, decarbonization, and green and healthy homes. So we have a really robust advocacy program. We do direct installs in low-income houses, so full home energy retrofits. And then we do a lot of public education around energy efficiency, weatherization, and distributed systems planning, as we did with Angela at PGE, which was really cool. So it's really great to get everyone here. And I just also, I don't want to get into things, but I just want to say I appreciate everyone being here and what is a difficult time for all of us in the district. And like, didn't want to start the meeting with just not acknowledging something about like how hard it is for students right now and families and teachers, and I'm sure staff as well, Kat, and that, you know, coming together and working together and showing that we can do things collectively is also really important in the time of a lot of distrust, I feel like. So like the more we work together and build community in this space just goes to show how important justice work is, and that community is the center of all of that, and that anything we build here, hopefully we can see kind of go throughout the district and throughout our communities. So thank you everyone for kind of sitting in this space together with all of us. So the next thing on our agenda is public comment, but I believe, Kat, you said we did not have anyone sign up for comment.
That is correct.
Okay, so that'll be a really fast section. Let me just double check. I'm having to flip back and forth between my two screens. So that means, Kat, we are up to you with staff report, and you have a little bit extra time.
Well, thank you. And I actually think that I won't need this full time, though I have I put in some space in case we want to have discussion. Because this meeting today, I think Charity and I discussed, is really an opportunity to get grounded and set on what the how the committee processes can really operate and be successful. And so I'm excited to get to dive into that. For the staff report, I didn't prepare another dashboard for you all because I have been working on taking all of the information you all have, and Jesse has been my saving grace data just fiend, I don't know what to call you, data just aficionado, working together to create and build out a dashboard on the Invisio platform where we'll be able to show progress towards actual key performance indicators that we are defining like in real time right now related to each of our climate crisis response policy goals. So it's really exciting. A lot of the work that we had outlined around engagement was to take place at the end of October / early November. So we've decided to push a lot of that until January. So we have a couple things coming coming out that are going to really define our pathways moving forward, including the community engagement design experience that we are inviting community partners and just, experts and passionate folks in our community and students and teachers and whoever wants to join to participate in. We just got our 2-pager about that, so I'll send that out after this meeting to you all to share with your networks. And so that there'll be a kickoff for that on January 26th, which we're really looking forward to. Like I said, I'll send this out afterwards. That will really define through the process we go through with the Innovation Studio at PPS that led the process for the Center for Black Student Excellence visioning process. That they will walk us through this process about how to create and elevate student leadership pathways and student-driven project and activities at the school level and at the district level through like an intensive community engagement and design process. So that'll be great. That's coming up in January. There's also a quick update on the decarbonization contract that we had a great discussion about last time. I know they used all of that feedback, and again, we're going to be doing an engagement series around this time, and so they decided to put that on pause until we were in like a better settled place and could really think through what, given all of the different discussions right now around priorities and school conditions, what the best use of that opportunity for community engagement would be in setting priorities around how to define in what order and how and when to bundle different construction projects to reach our decarbonization goals. So again, by our January meeting, I should have a much more clear update about where that scope of work is at, but I know they're moving forward on other parts of their scope that they can, a lot of the technical work that they need to be doing anyways, while they're getting that engagement pathway set up. So for our January meeting, we'll have more updates on those 2 scopes, as well as a better draft of our more fleshed out dashboard, which will be what we use to provide staff reports moving forward, which is really exciting. So you all will have something very clear to read through that you can kind of click through and have like clear status indicators and progress bars. So that's going to be really great.
Yeah, a quick question on that.
Of course. Yeah.
I don't know if it's too early, but do you have a teaser on what you're likely thinking the KPIs will end up being in the dashboard?
We are a little bit. Some of them are I mean, so that's like, we've so we've put the different goals for the climate crisis. So there's 3 pillars, right? And then underneath each of those pillars, there's goals. So we've put these different goals into different kind of buckets that really meet the themes of those goals with like work. So that is actually something we could kind of share with you all, is like the overall themes that are in those, and then the different indicators underneath them. And then it's going to be, there's a couple things that we're still fleshing out. We're working with our evaluator to get research on like best practices so that we can take some of those goals, the ones that aren't quite clear yet, like we have our green schoolyard inventory we just did, and now, so we know exactly how much green space versus, non-permeable pavement that we have, and what is our ideal state for those kinds of spaces. Like that's now like the next step of our research and how we're refining those. So we'll have more specific KPIs like across the board next time we meet, but I could probably give you like a sneak preview given the Invisio template spreadsheet.
That would be great. Don't mean to add more to your plate, but just
not at all.
nice
Yeah.
to see where the thinking's coming out.
Yeah. It's more of like, just depends on how messy you're okay with seeing the spreadsheet.
I'm happy to see the sausage making.
Yeah, totally. So we're happy to share that with you all. And again, as industry experts, I think there'll be an opportunity in that January meeting as we're defining, like that'll be after like some of our researchers come in and we've like had a chance to talk with some staff about like feasibility. I think there'll be an opportunity to say, okay, this is what we're thinking. So you all can have something to react to, and we can go through each of those key performance indicators as well and be like, oh yeah, I've actually seen this work really well over here. Or like, have you thought about approaching it this way? And so that'll be a good discussion as well. Yeah. I could share my screen if you want to see like that spreadsheet in the current making, but I wanted to get a sense while we were using time. Maybe we hold that for later and decide if that's a good activity. But I can also share it afterwards because I know some of you have expressed interest in offering some thought partnership on how we like continue to define this. And so I would love to schedule some time to meet here in maybe early December or early January, depending on how life goes, to be able to go through and talk
Yeah,
through
that'd be great.
some of those key performance. I think that'd be great too. I think that is, I do want to, point out that a lot of what the work that we're doing right now has not paused. There's a lot of work that is still moving forward. There's certainly things that are going to be looking differently depending on how the outcome of these different negotiations go. And really just working on like certain programs and processes that were in place that I might have shared with you a couple of months ago, like activities happening in schools are currently paused as well. So I just wanted to be transparent that in terms of a staff report, I didn't know like about sharing, like, I don't know what if it's just assume the things that are site-based are currently paused. And just really looking forward to seeing how, when we come out on the other side of all of this, and like Charity said, have the opportunity to do some real engagement work or centered around healing and building some trust and using this opportunity to talk about the whole student and teacher and staff experience and community experience with this justice-centered lens. I think that this scope of work has a real opportunity to be just really cohesive with the goals of our district moving forward. How we're able to fund that work is going to totally be up in the air, and this not even on the plate right now, but we're talking about. So I wanted to be transparent about that too. But I'm really optimistic about knowing that this is a priority for our community and seeing how we can creatively come together around that. So that's my big staff report. Do you all have any questions or things that I might have mentioned in the past that you're wondering about, or would like updates on that I might have missed?
I have a wondering
Sure.
that it's also maybe feeds into the next session about our roles.
Yes.
As I'm looking at, and this might be something we just don't wade into, but as I'm looking at some of the discussion around demands around temperatures and the situation in the classrooms, I've questioned, like, that's something this work is about.
Absolutely.
There's already solutions. There's already a policy in place to address that concern. There's already planning in place to find a way to do it. And obviously it isn't going to happen overnight, and because we all know that, and we know it's going to be funding, but there's already this work to address that. And I was wondering, like, would it be useful, and maybe it's not, but if we issued a statement saying, here's this work that's going on, and this work will address temperature, will address some of these systems and indoor environmental health issues. And like, that is what's one of the things that's exciting about this type of work to me, right? Is it addresses learning and asthma and all kinds of non-energy benefits that like is happening.
Yeah.
It's not going to be tomorrow because the planning process and the funding process, but like, how many people are aware that this work has actually already begun and that there are already solutions that are in the planning process? So I maybe it's just something we have to just stay out of, and maybe it's not our role, but it's just really, I've thought, like, I don't understand the reluctance to say anything when we're already doing this. And there's already a policy in place supporting those kind of changes. So like, that's just a wondering I've had. And like, again, like, if we talk about what our role is of this committee, can we write something to the board? If our role is to report to the board, hey, don't forget, this work is exactly about that. You know what I mean?
Hey,
And I was wondering if anybody else thought.
Charity, I think this is Angela. I think that that's a really good point. And in terms of if we respond or if we provide a response or not, I would just say, if we do think as a group we would like to, I think one of the things we should consider is referring to our first report that we issued to the board, which specifically said that we have a sense of urgency on accelerating this work and that there needs to be more funding related to this work, and that needs to be part of any budget considerations that happen. I mean, we were pretty explicit, and I think Jane did a really good job of talking to the board about the Kat's one person. She needs help. Any potential budget impacts can just be considered on the building side, but also on the personnel side to make sure that we accelerate this work. We have a goal to get it done in at this point almost 7 years, right? So I think that's already been frontline our position to the board in the past. So it doesn't hurt to reiterate it, I guess I'm saying.
I love that you brought this up, Charity. I actually have been working pretty extensively with my colleague in government relations to put together a draft, a memo to share with our bargaining team about the heat strategies that PPS can employ to mitigate temperature control. So and also just to provide in case you all, I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, but as part of our modernization goals, PPS does have a goal to provide HVAC upgrades and add AC into every building at PPS. So I can share a version of the memo with you all as well after this that has the things that we're able to kind of discuss publicly around what the strategy is. But the just to offer, like, for instance, as part of this modernization from the 2020 bond funds, 4 schools will be getting HVAC upgrades and air conditioning over the next year, including Lentz and Bridger and Harrison, and another one. I can double check on those. And then also with the PSEF funds available coming up, we're hopeful that we can use some of those funds to be able to add some one air conditioning addition and HVAC upgrade in a building can cost upwards of about $10 million. So with $17 million, that wouldn't go very far if we just focused on AC. But if we focus on window upgrades and weatherization and insulation, that can really help keep the cool air in the building when it's hot out, and vice versa when it's cold, and also help with the issues around moisture or air quality that some of the schools have talked about as well. So we're looking at, like, how can we really make this work for as many schools as possible. So those are all definitely things that I'm working with our bargaining team to let them know, like, these are different proposals and strategies that we're actively working on. And I can understand the frustration of being in a classroom and saying, that's really great that you have a plan, but it's 100 degrees in here and it's very hot. And this isn't an acceptable working condition. So I think there's a lot of creative solutions that are being talked about right now from a heat mitigation perspective, whether it's what time we're in school in the morning or how can we creatively move different classrooms around. There's all sorts of discussions happening. And in terms of providing a statement to the board, I think that's a great question for Julia. So I think that maybe Charity, you and I can give Julia a call, and whoever else might want to be on that call. There's a quorum issue, I learned, so we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So up to a point, and kind of get her sense. I would be currently just cognizant in the scheme of things that I am a central office administrator. And so when we're talking about adding personnel at this particular moment, I just want to be really cognizant of what we're discussing in that regards. But I think that there is a way to say that this is part of our long-term, even short-term strategy. And there's a way to meet our greenhouse gas emissions goals through these efficiency and insulation projects. And, PPS is also, I'm not sure if you all are aware of, has piloted over the last couple of months a few different heat mitigation strategies as well, that includes adding heat reflective window film to a couple strategic window placements in different buildings. And we tried a portable AC pilot in Ida B. Wells over September. So we're waiting to kind of hear how successful that was. That's not one that's going to reduce emissions, but we're working on the temperature side of it. So just to have you all have a little bit better awareness, and as you hear of other opportunities for strategic funding that we could potentially, I know that there's IRA money out there potentially for this work. And so just as you hear of these different ways we could potentially fold that into our funding opportunity, I would say this is our current most highest priority around our buildings. And I think if we're really strategic, we can do this work in a way that also helps meet our greenhouse gas emissions goals. Isaac, I saw that your hand is up. Sorry.
Yeah. It feels like I appreciate that some people are going to talk to Julia about a statement. I think Angela makes a really good point about pointing out that we've already kind of highlighted that this is an urgent area. The alignment with some of the issues that are being discussed as part of the bargaining is really helpful. It also seems like this is a great place for a student voice to stand out. And especially, I mean, assuming the students are aligned with this, having them support the statement and say, you know, like on behalf of the students, this is work that is really important to our future, not just in the classrooms, but in the community after we graduate. It would be a really helpful statement to add.
And can I ask, Kat, you mentioned something along the lines like you wanted to be, I'm going to paraphrase this poorly, but you wanted to be respectful of the fact that for asking for personnel given the current situation. I would just say, like, this isn't you asking, this is us acknowledging that you need help, and we've already done that in a letter to the board and a presentation to the board. So I would hope if we had a statement, it would be a reflection of us as a group and not necessarily coming from you. But hopefully you would support it. I think just so you know, like, this is in support of you because we feel like it's the right thing to do, and we felt that way for some time now.
Anybody else want to add in? Jane, Diane, Eric, Tess, Diego, thoughts? You can also just think about it. We don't have to make a decision.
I think like more communication with the board is better from our committee. Like I would be generally supportive of us. And I also volunteer to help with this. It's not like someone should do this. To like regularly feed out, especially when, and understandably Julie is not here tonight, but when we don't have a liaison person attending our meeting to bring that back to the board. I don't know what that looks like, a memo or kind of like some sort of briefing. Here's what we discussed and any like key issues that have been on the table for us. Just to remind them that we're here and we're like, we care about this and not to and keep it more top of mind. And even I think of when I think of the people that are serving on the school board now, like the chair and the vice chair aren't as knowledgeable about this policy as some of the other folks like Julia and Michelle and or I should go Director Brim Edwards, et cetera. So yeah, so I think it's helpful, and I would support sending something that underscores the alignment between things that are in the policy and things that are being negotiated right now, and I think like are universally cared about and supported by PPS families and teachers, and I think staff too. Like we all care about this, so yeah.
Maybe just going along with what you were saying there, Jane, I think is this being a continual process as well, and that communication. I think Kat, what you mentioned at the beginning, as far as the dashboard and the data and having those metrics so that we can dimensionalize what this is even better. And in the case of now, where prioritizations are gonna have to be made, I think is especially key to those future conversations too, where you have a little bit easier ability to quantify and metrics and have that visibility, and with those continued communications as we meet, I think will be really helpful going down too.
Anybody else? So it is a good segue then, Kat, into thinking about what are our roles and responsibilities, right? Like what should we be doing as a group collectively? Sometimes it's things that are by design, and sometimes it's things that maybe come up to meet the moment, right? So I don't want to not let anybody speak if there was somebody else that wanted to talk about that. And maybe suggest we talk about roles and responsibilities and then let people think a little bit and then come back to this question if we want to try to find a couple of people who might want to draft something. Would that be okay for the group? Because I think some people might want to think about it a little bit. So Kat, do you want to kick off then the next section?
Sure, happy to. So this has been a great, this last year has been such a great learning opportunity and an opportunity to get to know you all. So with bringing Charity on as the new board chair, Charity and the board manager, Roseanne, and I met so that we could have some better clarity on what, just to provide you all too with some expectations and when you come into these meetings, like what is it that I'm off like gonna provide today, and like what is it that makes sense for my scope and where can I offer, and talking about the roles and responsibilities of a community oversight committee. This is a really unique committee in that it has a similar structure as the Bond Accountability Committee, where that committee's role is to really show up, look at the bond reports and say, yep, that's on progress, that's not on progress. But it's really unique. I'm sorry, I have cats that are waging war in the background. So if you see blurry blobs flying, that's what's happening. I just wanted to address that kitten in the room. But the unique thing is that we don't have something like a bond budget that's already been planned out and has like processes and executions to refer to. It's like something that is emergent and in process. And I am also the kind of individual who really leans and enjoys into co-creative processes. And while that is Roseanne reminded me, a wonderful trait, it is not necessarily helpful when we're talking about a board oversight committee, because you all actually will, as Charity has mentioned to me, probably appreciate some more structure and expectations around like, this is actually what I can be here to do, since you all do have so much knowledge and expertise and passion in this area, that it's really easy. Like, I think we could all hang out all day and talk about this work, but being able to use your energy in a way that's going to have the biggest impact, and your expertise in the way that's going to have the biggest impact on what we actually need insight on, or whether we're providing updates for the sake of you all actually just like getting a chance to listen and learn about what is going on in the district without needing to provide feedback. Those were the kinds of distinctions that I learned from this communication that would be helpful to provide. And so as a part of that, I have created a document that I thought we could review together and actually add to together in real time today, where we can review the charter about what the role of this committee is, which I thought would also be helpful, welcoming on 2 new members to the committee to review like, what is the community charter and what is this role? What is it within the scope and what's not mentioned in the scope? And then actually go through the document together and give examples of things that either you all have encountered already so far that you would like some clarification on, like where we can talk through what makes the most sense, because since this is such a unique committee, everything that we're encountering is kind of new in the realm of like board oversight committee. So we're still kind of co-creating this, I like to tell myself as we go along, but making sure that it's within the scope of like, does this make the most sense given the committee's charter, so that we can use your energy and time most valuably. That being said,
I interject just a little bit?
Please do.
So I actually found myself just having a lot of questions. So I also asked if we could meet with the other person who was going to help to explain expectations of this type of committee within the district that maybe is a little different than our specific charter. I, like probably many of you, have served on all kinds of different kind of boards and committees. So I just personally, coming on as chair, felt like I wanted to understand my duties a little bit better, or the expectations. So like, for example, I'm hoping at the next meeting we will have minutes that we could review, because officially we're supposed to, so that we can have some areas where there might need to be a little more formality. And then some rules that we had learned about if we, how many people constitute a quorum, and when we have to have certain rules followed, that are public meeting rules. If we're not meeting at this official time, there are still some public meeting rules that we need to follow that I wasn't aware of. So like, I just wanted to make sure I as chair understood all of that. And I felt like, there are board of directors, board of governors, I'm on all kinds of advisory committees, and personally, I find that every one of those committees kind of has different expectations of what they would like us to do. So that's why I was just also asking for myself. And then also knowing that I am sometimes one of the people, we sometimes in this committee get down rabbit holes, and like I want to like check myself a little bit to be like, okay, are we asking questions that maybe are taking us too far in a direction that's not in our purview or not? So that was for me just something that I really wanted clarity on. And after that meeting, Kat and I both were like, oh, this was really useful. And we thought it would be good to just kind of just remind, I wanted to remind myself, but like just have that would be a discussion again. So that was a little bit, it just wasn't just Kat or someone at the district saying to do this. It was also me being like I need some clarity.
Yeah, and just in regards to that question comment, and I thought that it was so helpful because from a staff perspective, it helped me understand like, oh, it's more helpful to have like, this is the these are specific questions we have about a scope that you all can respond to and reflect on given your roles versus offering, something and saying, what do you think? Which like, that's such a different process. And so we just found it both really helpful. I included in the chat a link to the document, and I'll share my screen so those who are watching this can see what we're looking at, as well as a link to the charter. So I thought we could go over the charter first and then go over that document that I started to create. I don't know if this is able to be seen very well. I'm gonna zoom in just a little bit. Oops, that's awfully, okay, that works. So you all should have seen this or have access to it at least once before, but I thought it would be helpful. And Charity, let me know if there's a better way to go through, or anyone, if there's a better way to go through this. But I just thought we could go through it and just kind of touch on each part of the section. So starting with that, just looking at the mission of this committee is to monitor the effective implementation, provide transparency, and to track and report progress or challenges of the Portland Public Schools climate crisis, climate justice, and sustainable practices policy and the goals in it. And that the committee informs and advises the Board of Education, but does not have decision-making authority. And so from this, I think that it's really helpful, even just reflecting on the discussions we've already had today, to talk about how this goal of effective implementation and being aware of the current events that are happening, not just right now, but throughout this whole time we've had together over the last year, being aware of current events and being able to provide input on when are there being challenges to effective implementation, where do we need to provide more transparency, and then I just being able to see where this has already been going well, and to kind of lean into this committee scope. And part of this committee charge is to receive regular reports and data from the district staff and current status on planned implementation of policy goals and directives, which we've been doing in a variety of different formats. And so the next one we will have hopefully the most polished, most final format that you all will get to see. And then including the impact and policy implementation on frontline communities. To determine the status and implementation are consistent with identified goals of the policy. I think this is one that we've struggled with because only a few of the goals have actual specific like end dates or parameters. And so I think that's been part of this emergent process. But as we define those, that will become more and more clear in terms of the committee role to be able to like really react to that status bar and to share written findings with the board on at least an annual basis, but can be more than an annual basis. Sorry, there's an echo. It was weird. So committee membership, you all have been appointed and selected by the board. Committee chairperson appointed at least annually. Will not hold that position for more than 3 years. So that's a pretty long time, but can decide what that looks like. There's definitions in here. Let me know if you'd like to linger on any of these or if you have any specific questions or inputs. And wanted to get down to committee operations. And so this is the part that I think I did not spend quite enough time with, and now I have a much better understanding of, because this is what really helps set the roles and responsibilities and kind of puts parameters on the committee operations in a way that I think will actually be really helpful for making the most use of our time. So it's an advisory capacity to the board. And so it's being able to advise the board on what how our policy progress is being made, and the board oversees our whole budget. So being able to like think about this work from the perspective of how to best advise the board on how to continue making progress falls within this committee scope for sure. It's not responsible for program or project outcomes and does not direct staff, including any contracted staff, consultants, or contractors or auditors. So it's really understanding the role of the staff to be in charge of setting the scope of projects and directing how the work is going to be done. And then the committee is here to be able to offer, to be able to like see how this work is being done, ask questions about challenges, opportunities. And then I think also given just everyone's expertise, when there's particular areas where it makes sense for thought partnership or, increased feedback about how to tackle a specific challenge or get some real thought partnership around how to approach a specific issue from the perspective of the community and from the perspective of, serving frontline communities. I think that like is the sweet spot for this committee to be able to digest that information and share that with the board. So the charge of this committee does not include approval of contracts, appropriation of funding or budget, approval of district plans, implementation and projects, and selection of contractors, consultants, or other professional service firms. So a lot of what we've discussed in the past was a desire to be involved in, like, for instance, the contract selection process or the RFP selection process. And I learned it's not necessarily the charge of the committee to be involved in that selection process or designing the RFP, but an example could be if the staff put together an RFP, we could share that process with you all, and then you all could potentially also like share that RFP opportunity out to your community. So that's like an appropriate role to be able to say, yeah, we know that this exists and this is happening, and we can help get this out to all these, you all were selected because of your many diverse, wonderful spaces you're in. So being able to think about what that looks like, sharing it that way. And we can go through, we'll go through specific examples too that you all, or questions you all have. This says we'll convene quarterly, but I've learned that's just at least quarterly. So it's okay to convene more often. Formal decision-making process, provide technical administrative. Okay, so, and then this is the role of the staff in this space is to help provide a meeting room and audio visual technical equipment, which we've had with varying levels of success, but we're getting better. Report status of goals, preparation of committee meeting minutes. So that's something that my team has been creating the meeting minutes, but we haven't been as consistent on sharing the meeting minutes out or like having that part of this committee meeting process. So that's something after this meeting, we will share the meeting minutes with you with the board materials that we share with you all each meeting. And then you all will be able to check those out so that you can approve the minutes. And then we'll be posting the minutes. That means for the previous meeting at the next meetings, like after the next meeting happens. Let me know if that didn't make sense. Okay, that's the charter. So hopefully that wasn't too dry, but it should help provide a little bit of clarity, at least for me. Do you all have any questions or thoughts about kind of that charter before we dive in? Diane, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my question is, I do see the value and importance of having meeting minutes, but I was under the impression that our video recordings and because we record everything that was kind of covering, I'm trying to make my hand go down. I can't figure it out. Anyway, I'm just wondering about if there's any, if we have at this point any clarity about the the necessity to cover both, or how they interface, or yeah, just like
We
how
were
that
definitely told
works.
we should have minutes and that they should be approved at each meeting.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
And there's no I mean, obviously having both is good, but I'm just, is it basically that we're covering a technicality, or is this really like we're not doing our anyway, I'll accept I accept that answer. That's cool. I'm good.
I mean, let's make sure they're minutes and not notes, right? There's a difference. Minutes are just a summary of what was discussed, or records of votes if we have a votes. We don't need detailed. Diane said XYZ, and then Angela said, well, minutes.
Okay, great.
That's what I would say, because minutes are
that's
legally
helpful.
required often, notes are
Yes.
not.
Yes, 100%. Thank you for that clarification, Charity. That makes a lot more sense to me. I appreciate it.
I have and maybe this is more a question for part 2 of this discussion, but one of the examples that you mentioned around like consultants, it's not our role to select consultants, which I was personally never under the impression that we would do something like that. But what I think we had discussed as something we're interested in doing was kind of being involved earlier in the RFP process in kind of like scoping out role, and maybe like identifying what like high level, not the details, but like at a high level, what would be the important things to glean from a chunky contract. So I'm just curious if how that fit into the discussion, and
I asked that, and it was made clear that would not be an appropriate role for a board, a committee that's reporting to the board. So it's a governance issue, right? And I get that of running a nonprofit, like board is dealing with governance and strategy, and my board would never do something like that. And that is what basically was said to us. Even our own board wouldn't do that, So like, I feel like I'm on some advisory committees right now that, like a DEQ, where we are in a selection process. Someone from our equity committee gets put on the selection process, but that is a formal kind of panel for selection. This is more kind of an operational procedure that's across the whole district. So yeah.
Jane, can I clarify? Can you hear me? It says my internet.
I can, yeah.
Okay.
I'm saying not selecting, but talking about the content of the RFP.
Oh yeah, that was also, yes, they
We're not supposed to do either. That's what you're saying.
That was my impression. Maybe I don't know about Kat, what you felt, but that was what I felt like they were said. They did not feel that was an appropriate role for a committee like that we're on, because we're more in the board governance type of committee as we're reporting to the board.
So, when we had this discussion previously, I think what I remember us discussing was, while it did kind of resonate in the form of the RFP, Jane, like you mentioned, I think our intent was to just be able to understand what are the key initiatives that are going to be happening within PPS and that they'll be spending dollars on, and make sure that they align with the policy before we spend dollars and we commit to a consultant scope of work that doesn't align with the things that we think need to be key milestones for the year, or whatever period we're reviewing. So, I mean, I feel like that's within our scope. Charity, don't you think? I mean, did you have
I felt like there are certain things that, again, it depends on what kind of committee you have and what role. Like, there are government agencies that would totally let a advisory committee take on a role like that. But I feel like that is, from a governance standpoint, that's like what kind of power they want to see to the committee. So yes, we talked about how we might want to do that, and I don't know if we asked that specific question. I think, Kat, we did ask about like helping to set what might be an RFP, and that was very much no, they did not feel that was appropriate.
I want to really quickly clarify first, anyone who might be watching, including our students here, an RFP stands for a request for proposals. And so that's when like we're putting out a contract that is over a certain dollar threshold. We need to do what's called a competitive process. We can't just decide to work with any contractor. If the scope of work is over, there's all sorts of parameters, but a certain amount of money, for different scopes of work. That way we make sure that the district is giving work in a way that's competitive and equitable, and is really getting the best possible service for what they need to have done. So I just wanted to make sure that we were like clarifying that language as we go along.
Thanks for that reminder.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. I have Hannah's watching the YouTube and reminded us that like, what does this mean? So I was like, thank you. So shout out to Hannah watching.
And I do want to
go ahead.
add to this discussion. I think to support both what Angela and Jane are expressing, like if I look at the mission clearly includes reporting on challenges. And one of the charges is specifically to receive reports and report on the impact of frontline communities. And I think one of the ways that where there was an opportunity missed to use the experience of the entire committee, using the decarbonization roadmap RFP as an example. When it was presented to us, one of the feedbacks that we gave was that there wasn't the right level of engagement with frontline communities, and that was likely going to be a challenge to achieving some of the outcomes. And that whole process could have been mitigated and would have been much more efficient had there been not an ask for selection, but a hey committee, you've been selected because of your experience. Can you give us comments, opinions, suggestions? They don't even have to be taken, but it's using our experience to help make the longer process more efficient and ultimately to reduce the likelihood that we'd need to report to the board on challenges.
I don't disagree with you, and I brought that up. And I mean, they were pretty clear we are not involved in contracting, and that includes RFP process. So, I mean, when we go to report, that's something we could probably write about. But I did not get the impression from that conversation that they would be flexible, that this is kind of not just about this committee, but across the board. This is not an expectation of what a committee like ours would be doing. So, that is something we could bring up at a point, but like we would have to raise that, I think, in some kind of formal process there, because it is not part of a normal procedure.
Charity, sorry to cut you off, Diane, just real quick. I apologize. We did bring this up in our annual report. Jane, don't you remember? That was like one of the things we wrote in that report, is that one of the challenges that we saw.
So then that is a question I think we could have about what happens after those reports. Is it a report that's read and then, like if we bring up things, is that going to make a change if we notice? You know what I mean? If we brought that up and no one looked at it or got back to us about it, like I think that's a procedural issue of like, and it's one example, but what if we bring up something later on that's a much bigger issue? How is that responded to? Because this isn't, if that, I'm sorry, Angela, I don't remember because it was many months ago. But like if really we should maybe point that out and bring that up and say this was not addressed back to us maybe. And I'm sorry, Diane, I see you have your hand up.
No. It's a really good discussion, and it's the whole thing, especially what Isaac just put out there, is a great reminder of the tension around doing, a public process where people are very, I think rightfully so, very keen to make sure that things are fair, equitable, whatever, that there isn't, I hate to use the word corruption, but I think that's what, public processes are about. They're about managing situations where power is wielded in ways that it shouldn't be. And, I think essentially it kind of elevates the charge of this advisory board to operate in a way that's like a few levels more responsible, essentially, than if we were something else, right? But yeah, it does hamper us in a way that seems very inefficient, ineffective. We do have expertise that is desperately needed. And so we've got to figure out like how to navigate between these two things that are in tension with each other, right? I think we can do it. I think we can do that. I think we have enough expertise, but the solid hand that it sounds like you got, Charity. No. I mean, that's what it's about. It's about making sure that we're a solid, responsible to the public. By
our charter, we're responsible to the board. So that is the
Yeah.
tension there, because
Right.
we are a board subcommittee that reports to the board. But we see our role as bigger.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's
Right?
also clarifying. Yeah, that's also very clarifying. I think we're going to be able to do it, and I think we just need to be very aware of where the parameters are, and be able to, like, yes, figure out those mechanisms. Maybe it's like what you're suggesting, Charity, around just even weighing in on the contract and whatnot. That's the contracting process, the strike process right now. It's like, where are those places where it's okay for us to share our thoughts, and we need to understand, like, straight out the gate, that that's all we're ever going to get is to be able to share thoughts. We cannot influence, and we should not influence anything bigger or broader than that. And we're going to cycle in and out, right? People will come into this body and they will cycle out, and our influences and our impact can change, and I think that's appropriate. I think we need to just be dynamic and be ready to be dynamic and work this process over time. And to me, that's part of actually a leadership pipeline, which we talk about frequently on this in this group.
Kat, I see you.
Sure. I just wanted to offer, in reflection to all of this, I think one way to help mitigate, there's a couple different things that my brain is coming up with. One of which is the better solid implementation plan that we can be really putting out to you all, and the more collaborative that we can be in, like, the more thought partnership that I can provide to you all in how we're developing our implementation strategy, the more the RFPs will align with that strategy, right? Like, the idea would be that, like, or whatever contracts that we're pursuing are going to align with the strategy. And I did want to offer that the part of, I think, the tension and from the last meeting in our discussion was part of what I discussed earlier was not having a very specific, we got into a discussion about community engagement and prioritizing frontline communities and engagement. But what was missing from that conversation that I think Ari and I left and really reflected on was, like, really, what is the purpose of this community engagement? And we didn't hire, we hired folks that would offer a lens of community engagement really specifically for this contract, but we really, needed their decarbonization expertise. The RFP included not commitment, but as deliverables, equity plan for how they would put together their priorities that included prioritizing frontline communities and Title I schools, and how we approach our decarbonization goals. And as well as, like, different factors around environmental justice when we're looking at air quality and facility condition assessments and things like that in the actual RFP scope. And so I think part of where the tension was not necessarily that they didn't have that expertise. It was that tension of, like, but, like, what is the community going to provide input on? And that will determine what frontline communities, we really need to be engaging in this discussion, and then like what are the outcomes. And so I think that was a really helpful discussion to have, because they were able to leave with that scope being like, okay, we don't want to do engagement for engagement's sake. Like, what is really the purpose of this? And now we get some time to like really think about what that looks like. But that just to offer an example of where I think that was included, like, having that trust of the staff to say, these are the goals of our policy. And this really was included in the RFP scope. And given the different proposals we have integrity with the selection that we made. But then when we get to that part of like, when we're talking about the impact, being really, really clear from like, what is actually the purpose of the scope, I think is where we can have some help with that. And I think thank you, Angela, for including this language. I think having best practices around working with contractors would be helpful for moving forward policy objectives, is something that would be really helpful for our contracting team in general. We go through thousands of contracts every year at PPS. And so I think it would actually be really beneficial as part of our implementation strategy to provide a series of best practices when, working with contractors, to make sure that we are centering this policy in our work. And that is something that I think would make sense to share and get your expertise and thought partnership on for sure. Because I think that would have a more widespread impact across the district than I think what made us what I felt concerned about being able to respond to in relation to this language was any work related to meeting the policy implementation. Is that language in there? And that concerned me only because I could argue that there's hundreds of contracts, and I want to be really realistic about the time and expertise that you all are lending, since this does offer there's so many different scopes of work involved in this. And just want to make sure that we're able to create a process that will have a systems-wide change versus like a reactionary process that's going to try and capture where things are still going to slip through the net. Thank you for working with my verbal processing. Sorry, that wasn't super coherent, but that's kind of my thought process about how to make the most use of that power that you all have in your expertise. So I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you. Charity.
Oh, Angela, you have your hand up. That's all I said.
I verbally process too, so I'm not going to judge you at all. I do want to just touch on something that you mentioned, which is being aware that we cannot boil the ocean here. But one of the things that we did in our report to the board was try to prioritize key initiatives for this year to make sure that we were focused on a specific set of things. I think, and I would be interested in hear others from the committee, but I think that our goal was to come into this year with some very specific things that we hope to achieve. Last year was about planning and getting things set up, but this year is about action and being accountable to the policy. And so if others, maybe this is a good time to revisit that. What do we want to get out of this year? And now that we have Tess and Diego too, it'd be great.
Sorry, Angela, you kind of cut in and out, so I don't think we heard the very end of what you said.
Oh, sorry, I'm having internet issues here, but I was saying that maybe it's time to revisit what we hope to get out of this year, especially now that we have Tess and Diego, and get their input on what they'd like to see as students as part of this committee.
Yeah. I know, and I recognize too, Tess and Diego, it's very hard sometimes to be new in a committee on conversations that are continuation. So it's hard to step into new spot and not know what everybody else is talking about, because we're talking about stuff from last year. So I appreciate that takes a little bit of time to kind of come up to speed on things.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I feel like it'd be useful, at least for me, to know sort of what, I know you said you guys did planning last year, but it would be useful to know more about the specifics of what kind of projects and stuff you guys oversaw, so I could get a better understanding of exactly what this committee does and what it's done in the past, I guess. But from what I'm understanding so far, I think Kat made a really good point about sort of maybe creating a recommendation or like a set of, I don't know, steps for all of these different contracts, because it does sound like there's a lot and that might be too wide a scope. So trying to create some kind of systematic implementation of something might be more useful.
I'll be honest, from the conversation we had, I don't think they're interested, Kat, in hearing that from us. I felt like they had their way they do contracting and procurement, and they felt like we should not be involved in that. And I feel like personally, if we went down a rabbit hole of trying to change how they do procurement, there's a lot of other things that this committee could be working on that maybe are more substantive, are directly related to the work that you're doing. And like, I don't know if it's a good use of our time to bat our head against procurement where you don't have real control either. But that's just the first, as I'm verbally processing right now too. That I mean, I just felt like that was a very hard, this is how we do it, and like, we don't really want your input in this. I am on committees where that is not the way, like, you know, or there's government RFPs, like PSEF has a big RFP about to come out. They put it out publicly for public comment before they issue the RFP, right? So like, they get a lots of community engagement around the RFP and what's in it or not in it, and then do take feedback, adapt it, and then put out an RFP. That is a way to do public processing. But you know, this is not, PPS not a government agency. It's separate in a way, right? So like, there are some rules we have to follow that are about public rules, and others we probably don't. So I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I don't know if this is the best one for us to spend a lot of time on. Though maybe because it's where the money goes. Jane, sorry.
Yeah, I think I am interested in talking about purchasing, but more as like less in terms of what are the contracts for this policy specifically, and more of like a meta discussion around purchasing and how to overlay climate justice, sustainability, you know, those other social and environmental considerations into procurement. That is one of the items that's written into one of the goals of the policy. And what, I mean, I could be way off, but my impression has been that there's been some pushback from purchasing, and I feel like I want to push back again. I think it's a different conversation than we've been having tonight, but I'm just gonna like put my hand up and say, I would love to have purchasing folks come to one of our committee meetings, and that could be like a staff report about here's how PPS does purchasing, and it's an opportunity for folks on our committee to share what we've seen other organizations do that are more kind of maybe progressive in this area, and whether or not staff in purchasing is like how open they are to these new ideas is, I don't know, but like the conversation starts somewhere. I don't mean to like, I know I'm being really blunt with how I'm talking about this, but I'm just trying to be quick to add that as like something on Jane's wish list for items for discussion, because that is where all the money flows through. And I think it's such a leverage point in the system that we could really capitalize on. I'd love to see that like worked better, reflecting what this policy is trying to achieve.
I actually think this is a really great example of talking about kind of roles and scope, because I think the process of developing a system and overlay for purchasing is a project that staff would oversee, but the recommendation to the board to have like a resolution similar to like a certified business, like, because that's part of our purchasing policy, is to have prioritization go to certified businesses, certified Black owned or women owned businesses. Is something that is like in the board scope. And so just wanted to like provide that insight in terms of like what the opportunity is for the committee scope versus for the staff scope as we can continue to work. And I wanted to also hand it over to Jesse really quick because he's our pillar one just aficionado and has been working with our purchasing department and might have something to actually offer more concrete than like some hypotheticals that provide us some input on what our purchasing director has been saying about all this.
Yeah, it's been interesting listening to you guys talk about this because, as you stated, Jane, like goal 1.5 specifically calls out materials, products, and services as well, which I feel like is tied into all of this. I did meet with Emily Courtenage, I think I'm pronouncing her last name right, and we had a very brief conversation, which did sort of highlight how big of a task it's going to be to figure out a process for this, but the coming up with a best practices sort of guide for schools to utilize in purchasing is definitely something that we talked about and will probably be pursuing actively because it's something that that's more tangible, that we can get our hands on and work on faster. But there's a lot of pieces that are moving in there, and they can't necessarily mandate stuff on the district level for schools to purchase because the schools can purchase whatever they want to purchase. But there is progress in that area already happening.
Thanks, Jesse. I do think this has been a great discussion. I also want to reflect that it's like 10 minutes to 7. And yeah, and that is the endpoint for our meeting tonight, just to be reflective of like the time today. But I do think this has been a really good discussion that has actually led to progress on like kind of ideas, but also roles and responsibilities and how the scopes.
I'm really sorry I did not do a good job time checking there at the end because I in my head thought we were going to 7:30. So I really apologize for not being a better time watcher.
No, I actually think that this was completely related, like, because I think this example has given us an opportunity to talk through the mechanisms that board committees have that, for instance, staff don't have, such as recommendations to the board about resolutions or how to move forward different scopes of work. And then also the work that staff oversees, which would be like really getting into the weeds about what are the different systems and processes that would meet. Just because something is difficult doesn't mean it's impossible. And I just don't believe anything is really, I don't know. This is, I think that if we're creative and have imagination, we can really think about whether it's a green purchasing guide for schools or a set of best practices or, priority checkpoints that we could put on competitive procurement. Like, I think that there's mechanisms in place that we could really look at how to leverage like systematizing this. And I think that's one of those scopes we could look at. I did forget to mention, we did launch our climate crisis staff advisory group. I'm working on a better title for it, but it brings together staff from departments across the district that oversee, including purchasing and board management and everything, where we can talk about our different processes and challenges, and then how we can start to come together to work through different systems that we can create across the board to move this policy forward. So that launched this year. A couple weeks ago or more than that. I don't know. Time was bizarre. But we'll be meeting again in January as well. So we'll have some good updates for you all then.
So the last part of the agenda, we have two things like, do we have any action items? And I wanted to circle back to, now that we've had a bit of time to think, how does the group feel about, should we draft something about, how the work of this committee and following the climate crisis policy can address issues around temperature and indoor environmental health. And that, as we talked about at the beginning, how do people feel? Do we want to try to draft something? And if so, I guess Jane said she might want to help do that. I don't remember. I don't want to put words in people's mouths. So I just wanted to bring that back and see, do people feel like we want to move forward with that?
I'll say that I love the question that you're raising, Charity. Also, I think your facilitation is great, and the discussion's been really good. I don't worry about the time at all. But I think for this particular process, I just imagine, and I don't know directly, but I imagine it's a very, very intense process that folks are engaged in right now. I don't know if I don't know if it's really, I don't really, my sense is this might not be the right time, place, or context for us to exert that kind of energy. I do like the idea of recognizing that there will be, I mean, I'm hoping that this process opens up the recognition that there needs to be more ongoing discussion around lots of things, having to do with budget, having to do with prioritizing various pieces of work, and that we can insert our feelings, thoughts, and wisdom or whatever throughout that process, that we're designed actually to do that. That's part of what we're supposed to be doing. So I think I just don't think that this is the right moment. I think we need to honor and respect the fact that it's very intense right now. People are not going to have time for us, and that's just my pessimistic view on it, I suppose.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise it. I don't feel like I have a strong desire either way, but I felt it keeps coming up in my mind, so I felt like it was appropriate to at least ask the question. Does anybody else have a strong feeling one way or the other?
I guess, do we have to write a letter, or could we have a conversation? Can we just maybe meet with them and remind them that this was something that was important to us, so we mentioned it in our report? I mean, do we have to? I don't know. Is there alternative ways to convey the message, I guess?
I feel like that's a really good way to start, because I feel like I definitely respect the points Diane made, but it also feels like the converse is, if there's a lot of different voices asking things of the board, and this isn't one of the points that gets raised, is that increase the risk that it gets deprioritized. And perhaps a way to address that is to just have a conversation with our board rep, Julia. Just have a conversation with Julia and say, hey, is this the right time for us? We want to make sure that the student support for this effort and other things is not lost in the conversation, but we also want to be respectful. It's probably a chaotic time as well.
Anyone else? Eric, Jane?
No, I think I agree with Isaac. What you're and Angela is saying is that maybe it's something more informal, a long conversation to see where it does or doesn't fit in going forward. Certainly going to be important going forward in other areas to identify where the work is actually operationally underway in that. But yeah, maybe this is a time to decide where that makes sense to me as well.
I don't feel strongly about it, honestly. I kind of defer to other folks as, like, if someone really wants to send a letter or not, but or have a discussion. I just wonder, because everybody is so busy right now, I don't know that meeting or even having a conversation is on the table for the board members. I don't know. But so maybe like an email or a letter would be easier to receive these days. But I don't know. Again, I don't feel strongly about it.
Tess or Diego, do you have thoughts? I mean, I get to, you're brand new, so you might be processing.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, like, I know there's a lot of tension and a lot of crazy things happening for the school board right now, but as they kind of work with teachers to like make resolutions about how they're going to address that issue of temperature. I don't really see like, these, like the temperature problem, like automatically getting fixed right when teachers come back to school. So maybe in the future, as they start addressing these problems and making the fixes, maybe that would be a better time.
Yeah, I think this is one of the issues that like really directly impacts students' lives every single day. So I wouldn't want it to be like deprioritized, but it does sound like it's not necessarily the time to go super far into it.
Well, Kat, I think you had mentioned at the very beginning that maybe we could have a meeting with Julia. Like, what do you think? Is that something that's even on the table? Because she wouldn't, you did come to these meetings in the past, but
She's so busy doing a lot of important work, which is wonderful. We're very fortunate to have her on our board. I would say so something that she's offered in the past was to provide and would love to have is they do committee reports to the board every regular board meeting. So we could provide, there could be a summary from this meeting about discussions tasked and priorities and kind of questions posed that could be sent to Julia with a ask of like, hey, if you're around for a conversation, we would love to talk a little bit more about these before we send a specific committee report to the board, because I know that that's just something they would like to have anyways in their regular committee meetings as available. So I think that could make a lot of sense as a way to just give a summary of what was talked about and specific questions around processes or roles, whether it's around the opportunity to provide a statement or show support of that particular item, and how the policy could help move that forward, or even other resolutions that were talked around purchasing. So yeah, I think it's worth sending an email, and I can ask if our board manager can help set up a meeting as well, if that seems to be the best like path forward.
okay. I think Jane had a good point in the chat saying, if we have the minutes, that's also could hopefully be a summary of some of the questions. Yeah, and then that could be sent. Hey, this is the minutes summary, and here's some of the stuff. Is that possible to have a meeting to discuss it? And I get right now if it's not possible, like really, there's better places too for them to spend their time right now.
I
I know what
you all having a lot of grace. So
I know we're at time.
7:01. So
okay, so I just want to say something quickly. I felt kind of indifferent until I heard what Tess said, and it really spoke to my heart. And that, like, Tess and Diego, if this is important to you, this is why I'm part of this committee. And I think that that's changed my perspective, in that it's worth having a conversation and in an email or whatever message we need to convey, because this really is for you two and all the kids that are at PPS. So it feels more urgent to me now, I guess. I'll leave it at that.
thank you, Angela. Well, it is 7:01. Anybody else have something really quick? Otherwise, we'll respect everyone's time. Okay, I will say meeting's adjourned.
thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a good rest of your night.